Sorry about that. I did not know it was streaming. I was trying to get everything set up, but it wasn't showing up on my end. So I apologize for that. Anybody who's on YouTube right now, I am getting Facebook started as well. Anyways, good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Price, and welcome to the 7th episode of the Daily Grind. And the title for the episode is going to be Rest. And so I'm tired today, so I guess we're done here. I hope you got the lesson, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Grind. No, I'm just playing. But rest really is vitally important, absolutely in the physical sense, but that's not as much what I'm going to be referencing today, because as we're going through this book, I've told you about the method that we're going to be studying out. And the idea behind it is that truth is knowable, and whether that's true or not is left to be proven. But when you're taking on something as important, as heavy, as real, as thought-provoking, and mentally draining, potentially mentally draining as that, then we really have to recognize when we're reaching our capacity. And I say this not just for y'all's sake, I say it to myself, because sometimes we think we're making progress. I don't know if y'all have ever done that, stayed up late working on a project, and then the next morning you get up and you go, what in the world is this? Because what you thought was rational and understandable at 3:30 in the morning turned out to be incoherent at 7:30 a.m. on your way to turn it in at class. Maybe that hasn't happened to you, but for me, it definitely has happened on more than one occasion. So recognizing when you're reaching that point is important. How are we going to recognize it, though, when it comes to something like this, where it's not about physical assignments? But first of all, I would say recognize that this doesn't have a due date. Our tendency is probably going to be to put a lot of pressure on this because of its level of importance. If it's something worth pursuing in the first place, like it was for me, because I couldn't continue in my life wondering if there was anything that was true. If there was, I had to know what it was. There's times that mentality has not been beneficial for me, because when I did not couple it with rational thinking, recognition that even if I came to the result, that I may not be able to understand what it meant right then, or that I was just going to have to repeat everything that I was doing right then the next day or the day after, if I wasn't willing to just put it down and set it aside and come back. And so that's the type of rest that I'm talking about here, because it's not just about the physical moment where you're so tired. It's about when you've been trying to understand a thought for a while. I may explain something about epistemology. Now, the word epistemology, for those who weren't here in earlier episodes, it means how we know what we know. So I may explain something about epistemology that you've never heard before, and your mind is just wrestling. It's not that it necessarily agrees or disagrees, but you keep coming back to the same point where you're just not understanding right then. Sometimes a thing is understood by seeing it in practice, and so a concept doesn't really set in until you walk away from the learning setting, like the hearing, the being taught setting, and actually see it happen in real time. And so maybe that'll be one of your hang-ups where you need to take a break, you need to rest. Also, each person learns differently. So some people might watch this video right here and they may learn everything within it and its contents very, very easily. For other people, they'll read the fiction books about the same subjects, and to them it'll make all the sense in the world because they have a storytelling type mind. For some people, it'll be not about visual at all. It'll just be like turning something on in their car, having it read to them, whether it be the book or this. The point is, there's tons of different ways that people learn, and they're all different. And trying to process this type of material will be more beneficial if you know which way you learn better. And so you can do multiple methods. Maybe your visual learning coupled with your storytelling, whatever the case may be. I would say if you're having trouble understanding, maybe you're not using the way that your mind is able to understand things the best. So maybe take a break, come back, and try a different approach for how you learn this type of material or any type of material. Not everyone's going to learn the same way, and not everyone's going to learn at the same pace. So don't beat yourself up if you're not getting it right away. And some of this is going to feel very frustrating. I say that because growing up, if you can remember back to the younger days when you were in school, if you were in school, but we would be learning the definitions of words and how to spell them. And most of us agreed upon the spelling, and at the time when we wrote it on the test, we agreed on the definitions. We had to in order to move on to the next step, the next vocabulary, the next test, the next grade, whatever it was. We had to agree to certain definitions. But now that we're older, we think a lot of definitions are subjective. In fact, I've noticed when we look at the dictionary sometimes that words actually have more than one meaning, and sometimes those meanings actually don't align with one another. And so it's no wonder we have so much confusion in our conversations when even our dictionaries can't give us uncontradictory terms at times. So why it can be so frustrating is because I am going to define certain terms. I'm going to give them a definition. To the best of my ability, these words should align with dictionary type definitions very close. I may try to make it simpler, more concise, or basically just try to make sure it's not contradictory in any way, or that I found a lot of definitions have what I would just call unnecessary words. There's another word for that I'll define much later in the series, but with these type of words I'll probably just try to take them out if they're redundant, that kind of thing. The point being is, if you've got your definition in your head and it's how you've been thinking about it for 7 to 10 years, and all of a sudden, or maybe even your whole life, and all of a sudden I come along and I tell you that that's not what that word means, it's going to be difficult for you to be able to have a conversation about it because you've already set that definition, you've already locked it. And I'm not saying that that word doesn't mean that, because honestly, terms could be signifiers for whatever definition that you want. For the sake of conversation, though, it's going to be really, really important that we can manage to get on the same page. And if we can't do that, that's another signifier of when to take a break. It means we're not going to get anywhere. You feel your frustration rising because you didn't like the way I defined something? Take a break. I hope that you'll watch this video first, or this concept right here first, before you hear me define any terms, because I definitely have seen that it becomes a trigger for people over the last few days. And the fact that I won't let them shift between definitions and continue the conversation. It's going to feel pretty frustrating because we've somehow managed to start doing that without recognition. And I can explain a little bit, but I don't want to get too far into it. So what the best way I can do it is just to give one example of something that has continually occurred for me, which is that when you add an adjective to something that's absolute, what you're really doing is just saying it's something else. And that was vague for what it actually means. Say your term, the word I've been struggling with recently with other people is reality. So say your term is, for reality, means what you see in your general vicinity. Okay, that can be a valid definition. I don't want to outright disagree. Sorry if you hear the rain in the background. It can get a little loud in here, but I don't disagree that that can be a valid term for using it. So what I would do is I would say, okay, I accept that term. But, there's a couple of things that we're trying to use that word for as well. So some people are using it for your reality, meaning your perspective, what's going on in your mind. Also, they can use it for existence as a whole. So there's one word being used for three different things, and it's used this way in regular conversation. And we don't stop one another to go, okay, what do you mean by reality? And the reason being is because we have allowed ourselves to basically decide that that's okay, that you can use that word three different ways. Or that adding an adjective to it, like conceptual reality, that which is in your mind, and then we call that okay because, well, it's in your mind. You've described a different version of reality. The problem is, with a word like reality, it's absolute. If reality means existence of everything, and then you turn around and try to add an adjective to the word reality, all you've done is say that it's not reality. Because reality is the existence of everything. Therefore, adding a word to reality means it's something completely different. And you really, in terms of a conversation, you could say conceptual reality. But the truth is, it wouldn't be reality at all. It's just a term used to identify something that's completely different. And so at that point, what I'm going to do is, in order for us to have a conversation about any subject, we either have to affirm all of the previous terms and all of the previous steps that have been taken to get to that point, or if you really need to change a definition, if it will make the conversation flow better because it's already in your head. You've known that this word meant this thing for this many years, and you can't change your mind about it. Well, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my best to accept, for the sake of conversation, accept that term that you're using to mean what you're saying it means. And I'm just going to try to clarify it to make sure I'm understanding it. That's not to try to change your definition, but I may reword it to make sure we're on the same page, because like I said, this is going to end up with a lot of frustration if we're unable to do that. So at that point, that would leave a couple of more concepts in this particular case. So say you defined it, like I said, as your general vicinity. And then I would explain, well, what are you defining as the reality that only exists in your mind? Not actual reality, but what are you defining that as? Since what you define actual reality as is the local things around you. So that's our term for the local things around you that you're experiencing that are within your outwardly perceivable range. Okay, so that is your reality. Now, what is the word for what's in your mind? And what is the word for existence as a whole? And when I did this, it's been a real struggle sometimes because people think that it's okay for the one word to mean these multiple things. It just makes it impossible to have a conversation about any of these subjects. And so, if you can't do that at the time, it's time to take a break. It's time to walk away. It's time to figure out what terms are acceptable to you, and then you can come back to the table and we can have a discussion again. But any discussion past the point of you getting frustrated or you getting hostile or you being able to not come to agreement or affirmation about what a term is going to mean for the context of conversation means the conversation is going to have to be terminated. And it's not because I don't want to have the conversation, but because we're not really having a conversation of anything meaningful at all, because we don't mean the same thing. You're making a statement, I'm not understanding what that statement means, or vice versa. And so, even if we agreed with each other on something, we still wouldn't be actually agreeing. And so we can't do that for the sake of clarity, for the sake of truth. If the ultimate goal of all of this search is to find what the truth is, then that's the time to take a break. Also, we're going to have a tendency to want to learn a little more that day. I've laid out this podcast specifically with the intent of slowing down burnout, because it is a lot of material, and to try to force it, it's going to bring a headache sometimes. And if you keep pushing past that point, you're headed for a burnout. And I really know how beneficial learning this method, learning this chain has been to my life, has been to my interactions with other people, and how I think about them in a more positive way, and how I think about myself in a more positive way. And I want y'all to be able to understand why that is and be able to have it for yourselves. But trying to get there too fast, even the smartest people, it it can be debilitating. It can be frustrating. It can make you frozen, and it can make you backtrack and walk away. I know, because I have backtracked and walked away for moments where I pushed too hard in trying to understand things that at the time, without a break, without rest, I just wasn't really capable of understanding. But the constraint wasn't ability, it was timing, it was rest. And so learning how to recognize the differences in when it's about our unwillingness to accept because we don't want to versus our unwillingness to accept because in that moment we can't understand. Maybe it's because we missed a previous step or misunderstood a previous step. And so we need to go back, look at the step process, see where we got to, see where we absolutely understood to, and then figure out what the next step is. So that's one of the things that's going to happen anytime we're going to move forward is agreement to terms, also agreement with every past step. So if someone comes along and wants to disagree with step 12, they say claim 12, step 12 in this process, in this method, it's incorrect, and here's why. Now, all of these steps are built on one another. What that means is if a step hasn't been proven yet, and you try to use evidence outside of the method to prove it, what that means is you're going to have to show every step from the very beginning in your own chain of reality of truth and show exactly from step 1 how you get there in order to use that as evidence. I'm requiring that because it's a logical necessity. What I mean is we haven't actually proven anything if you can't track the chain all the way to the beginning. What we've done is asserted something based on things or claims we haven't proven yet. And so more than likely, the only way for you to really do that is to affirm at least some of the chain. In order to make a claim. If you've got a different way, I'm open. I'm all ears, and I'm willing to listen to see if you've got a entirely different chain, an entirely different method. But if not, then you will have to affirm up to whatever step you want to challenge in order for us to have the discussion, unless there is, as we said, a term or a definition that you would like to change. We can point that out, and I will do my best to affirm your change in definition and clarify any other definition or term that I need in order to continue in that conversation. And so that's how it's going to work moving forward. As I said, the reason for that is, say you argue step 7, and then I give you a response based on step 4 and 3 in order to show why that's incorrect. And then you start arguing point 4 and 3. This is unproductive, because why are you arguing with step 7 if you actually just disagreed with step 3 and 4? All of them are built on each other. So if you didn't agree with step 3 and 4, then you never got to step 7 in the first place. For you, step 7 wasn't a reality because you didn't accept step 3 and 4. So it's best if you can make sure you've walked every step in the chain so that you can specifically address where you think the chain goes off the rails without bouncing around to multiple different steps of the chain, which are all related, and many of them are contingent on each other. And so if you're arguing a later one, but you didn't agree with an earlier one, the reason you're not agreeing with the later one is because you didn't agree with the earlier one. So we need to address the earlier one first, and then the later one later. I'm just clarifying this as well. Hopefully people will go back and check out this reference before they hop into conversations. I'm actually going to try to mark this or mention this one in multiple videos so they can understand that this type of affirmation of all prior claims is going to be the other only way that we can have a meaningful discussion. So, got to affirm all prior claims, and we've got to come to common definitions. You could either accept the ones that I've already laid out. I will lay out the definitions of every step of the chain as we move along so that they're not in question. If you need clarification about what that means, if my definition didn't offer you the understanding, you can definitely ask a clarification question, and you absolutely should, because once again, this is going to be the only way to get on the same page. And since the ultimate goal for me is to seek truth, to seek understanding and clarity, I want us to get on the same page. I want you to form a cohesive, coherent argument. I want you to challenge the method. The reason being is if it's wrong, I want to know so that we can amend it. The ultimate goal wasn't being right. I started this whole thing because the search for truth was more important than being right. That hasn't changed, and that's not going to. So I look forward to the challenges that come to the method, the new ideas that you can present, maybe the gaps that could be filled with more steps in order to further clarify specific arguments that could be brought up against the method itself. And maybe it doesn't prove it wrong, but maybe it shows a gap where we could make a step to show an increase in efficiency, so that somebody doesn't argue that same point over and over and stuff like that. It's open for improvement. I'm not coming to the table saying I have every possible gap figured out. I'm saying we're in this life together. We're on this journey together. We're more likely to find success in nearly everything we do together. And we've all had so many different experiences. To bring them together in order to find it, what the truth really is, I see no more important goal, because truth leads to purpose. And what is a life without purpose? And if there is no purpose, don't you want to know? That way you can live accordingly to whatever you find. Whether you find that truth exists, truth doesn't exist, whether you find that that truth is one specific way of thinking, one specific set of behaviors, whatever you find, wouldn't you want to know? Or wouldn't you want to at least know if you couldn't know? For me, that's what really started these type of questions. For me, that's why I believe I'll be pursuing this journey every day for the rest of my life, and I'm excited to do so because I think it's why we're here. If not, if we are just a bunch of atoms or something smaller just crashing into each other, coming from nothing or something, or I'm not even sure how you would explain it. If it's just all random, if it just proceeds forth from something without rules or structure, it just comes out of nothing for all intensive purposes, and it just ends in looking exactly like this. Hang on just a moment, y'all. without any planning, any organization, any purpose, any actual truth or laws or constraints. How do we know we exist? How do we know what's true? How do we know anything's worth knowing at all? How do we know what we know? Epistemology. That's what this is all about. And as I said, if I get there and I recognize that that's exactly what this is, if someone can come along and prove to me that that is exactly what it is, that it is all random, proceeds forth from, and this isn't to misrepresent anyone's position, okay? This is because I can't understand if you are not saying nothing, what you are saying. I can't perceive that something comes forth from nothing. For me, this doesn't feel like a rational thought. And we'll walk through the steps of the method to explain why. But if you believe that, then I want to hear you out. Because if you're right, I want to know. I absolutely want to know, because the truth is more important. Because allowing yourself to believe a lie about reality means you're not even really living in it at all. You're creating your own fantasy world. And let's just say when you're living in your own fantasy world, you're headed for a collision. You're headed for an impact, just like Marcus has in book 1 of the book series. So, by the way, I usually mention it starting out, so I'll go ahead and mention it now. The book series is available at burdenofproof.co. That's actually the shop page of the website. The Flaw is available for free. It'll say $0 on it, so if you just click it, I think you got to hit add to cart and purchase. It won't require any information or any cost to you at all. It actually is 100% free download. So I hope that y'all check it out and test it, see if it's one of the forms of learning that best suit you, as we were discussing earlier on in this video. But just to recap, one of the lessons passed, which is actually the last one, what we need to be sure we're not guilty of moving forward is claiming that nothing can be known and then turning around and speaking as if we know something for sure. This includes that something can be admissible as evidence. So if I say nothing can be known, and then I turn to you and say, but we have to look at the evidence. What I have said in those two statements when put together is that I don't actually know what the evidence is, but you should accept what I'm saying is evidence as evidence. I know that's not what they intended when they came out of their mouth, but when you apply proper logic to it, it's a self-defeating statement. And so we need to be very aware that there's going to be a lot of people who don't recognize that they're making self-defeating statements. I've been one of those people very many times. And if I point out that a statement is self-defeating, or that it contradicts a prior step or a prior claim, or itself, please know that my goal isn't to ever attack you personally. It's just that the only way that we're going to get to truth is if we dismantle false realities, false arguments, including my own. And so, just as I'm asking you to not take offense if I point out a flaw in your argument, I'm going to do my absolute best to make sure I do the same. And if I'm not, please, please call me out on it. Say, hey, I think you're getting frustrated. I was making an argument and you're not seeming to get it. And point out to me that maybe we need to take a break. Okay. So this rule, as I said, it doesn't just apply to you. It applies to me. Now, hopefully that won't be the case. Hopefully I have practiced this methodology enough in order for that not to happen. But I want to clarify that it's more important to me how I treat you than anything I ever teach here. Because if I don't treat you with love and respect, then I'm undermining the entire purpose of why I started to do this in the first place. It's so that we can know something is true in order to strengthen our community, to build up each other, to love one another. And if that's not what I'm doing in that moment, then I want you to stop me. Please don't hesitate to do so. As I said, this is more important than whatever the lesson is that I'm trying to get across that day. It means that I am not properly teaching in the way that I should, and I should be called out on it, because ultimately that's not what I want. And if you do mention it to me, I would be incredibly surprised if I wasn't willing to take a step back and take a breather and come back. More than likely in that moment, because I've been practicing this for quite some time now. I'm not saying I won't get to the moment where that happens, but if you call me on it, I will probably take one breath and apologize, because I recognize that it is possible for me to get frustrated, and in that moment for me to not recognize that I need to take a break. So, like I said, that's really the last main lesson that we needed to get into, that was absolutely vital to cover before we start delving into the method itself. I'm so excited to see what happens when this method makes contact with reality, not just in this room here, not just by myself, because that's not what this is made for. So when I think about it, like a method when it comes to science, it's a little different. You can go into a lab and create the environmental factors necessary in order to test something in a lot of cases. Getting the right chemicals, or whatever the case is, beakers and test tubes and burners, in order to test your hypothesis, your methodology. And in that setting, you're able to fully, I guess, see that out. But a method like this, it can't be tested that way. A method like this doesn't prove itself by sitting in a quiet room by yourself telling people what they should believe. A method like this is only proved by testing it in a real place with real people, and real definitions and real relationships being formed. This type of method can only be tested when it makes contact with reality, not through just a screen. and not just talking to myself. And so what I'm really looking forward to, and by the way, I'm checking into venues for where we can do this live and have other people who want to join in on the podcast, who want to have the opportunity to challenge the different steps that we're taking in a real life setting, or maybe to just talk about what's going on in their life and how we can use this method in order to work through the struggles that they're going through at the time. I've definitely applied it to myself and found it to be profitable and beneficial to my life. And I really hope that it's going to do the same for the lives of many others. And so I look forward to that aspect of it as well, to maybe helping people to be able to process their own information. What I mean is, we all have frameworks in which we think. And a framework is just a set of rules or conditions that we've put into place, whether because we believe we had to or we want to, and we make the best choices we can based on this type of framework. And sometimes the framework we've built doesn't match reality. And so part of what the method is supposed to do is to build up the person while revealing where the false framework is, so that people can willingly decide to remove it themselves, and then to make the right decision for them based on, the criteria that's real, rather than the criteria that's set forth that doesn't match what's actually going on. And that's what I'm just telling you what the method's supposed to do. I'm not making any claim today that it does it. I'm claiming that when I applied it to my own life, I saw these type of results. And so I would like for you to give it an attempt to apply to your life and see if you find the same result as well, that it did bring clarity, that it did remove misconceptions of your situation, or that it did show you that it is possible to know something for certain. I'm not claiming, again, that it does any of these things today. I'm not making that claim. I just want you to test it. I'm going to I'm claiming that there is a method that exists that has the potential to do some of these things that I've talked about, maybe even all of them. But I want you to scrutinize it so we can find out together. I want you to correct it if I get it wrong. And I want us to grow together in the knowledge of truth and in love for one another, as long as we prove that truth exists and that love is possible. But either way, that second part, I'm going to choose to show you whether we determine that any of it's real or not. I'm going to choose to live as if there is an objective truth, whether or not it's necessary, because in reality, how people react to you having a certain set of unchanging standards, if those standards are perceived well by other people, whether they're true or not, whether truth exists or not, Um, it definitely makes things more understandable, and it makes life more cohesive and relationships feel better, even if these things weren't grounded in reality. To live with something consistent is still the way that I intend to live. And even if love wasn't real in the sense that we think it is, to treat one another with kindness and respect and try to make one another feel greater, better, to grow is also a very kind way to approach things. It's a very consistent way to approach things, rather. Going through life just colliding with people for no reason at all, it wouldn't make any sense regardless. But it's such a hard concept here. See, I'm even wrestling to find words to say, if the truth doesn't exist, then this is how, I would probably act anyway. Or if love doesn't exist, then I would still act in a way that's loving because it produces the best results. But all of this is me dancing around trying to pretend that nothing is objective. It's a hard position to hold. Um, but if you hold that position, that's the only reason I'm trying to phrase it this way, that if the truth exists, if there is something that's objective, if there is something that exists at all. I keep phrasing it this way because if you don't believe that, I want to hear why. Because I still cannot make sense of it. But I'm looking forward to your explanations. That's really what we're going to start with in step one, is a discussion of existence itself. Is existence provable, really? That's kind of the question that's going to be asked. And how would we know? The question that's going to be interwoven throughout all aspects of this journey. How do we know what we know? I appreciate y'all joining in for episode 7 of the Daily Grind. I'm really, really looking forward to the next episode on Sunday, and hopefully it'll be around 6:30 a.m. like this one is. Should start between 6:30 and 6:45. As I say, my scheduling constraints have been rather difficult at the moment, but I'm going to take my own advice, and I'm going to take a rest. I tend to do so one day a week to step away from the heaviness of life, the heaviness not just in the mind but also in the body, and to enjoy the fruits of what I've produced in the 6 days before, to enjoy life itself. Because what does it all mean? What is all the success? What is all the learning? What does any of it mean if you don't take the time to rest and to enjoy and to appreciate what comes as a result? And so I encourage you to do that today, tomorrow, every day. Find little moments like that where you appreciate the things. And I would encourage you to take one day a week, if you can find a way, to take a rest, mentally, physically, emotionally, and find alignment with whatever your end goal is. And so you can spend your focus on that one the next week, comes, or when that next day comes after your rest. But in that moment, just be okay with knowing that you have a goal, that you've worked your hardest to get there so far, and that come tomorrow, that you'll do it again, that you'll get back up and you'll keep pointing that direction. If you don't have an end goal, I would encourage you to ask why not. And how can you know what if you're making the right decisions if you don't have a goal about what direction you're headed? I don't think you should just make a snap judgment right now. If you haven't thought about it, take your time. Take your time. Maybe even follow the method for a little while before you choose an end goal. You might find that more useful than trying to choose one and then realizing it doesn't line up and having to let it go later. But it is very, very important to making decisions now to know where you're headed in the future. And as I said, enjoy your rest, and I will be speaking to you soon. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to getting to know y'all. I hope that y'all come out when I get a venue. If you're nearby or even a little while away and you're willing to make the drive, that's one of my favorite parts about all this is the opportunity to get to know each one of you who's willing to step out of the comfort of your normal lives and to take a deeper dive in our search for clarity and truth and relationships together. I think that's so awesome. And I hope that you're doing that in your daily lives with the people around you, wherever you are right now. Because I don't think there is anything more valuable. And I look forward to proving it to you. I really hope that I am able. Once again, not making that claim, not making the claim that I will. I am looking forward to the possibility that I might be able to show you that. And so until next time, test everything and hold fast to what is true.